If you are suggesting that the violence at the Capitol on January 6th was part of some operation orchestrated by FBI sources or FBI agents, the answer is no, it was not.
I know that everyone here will soon be marching over to the Capitol building to peacefully and patriotically make your voices heard.
It's not protest, it's insurrection.
When I said how many agents or assets of the government were present on January 5th and January 6th and agitating in the crowd to go into the Capitol and how many went into the Capitol, can you answer that now?
I don't know the answer to that question.
You don't know how many there were or there were none?
I don't know the answer to either of those questions.
I think you may have just perjured yourself that you don't know that there were any.
Smoke pops, and when F starts to leave, he's got 4 people in front of him and 4 people behind him, and they literally get him out of there.
Based on your investigation so far, do you have any evidence that the Capitol attack was organized by, quote, fake Trump protesters?
We have not seen evidence of that.
We need to go into the Capitol!
I was in the front. I also orchestrated it.
Well, we're glad to be back here with the Josh Calloway Podcast. We have a great guest with us here today, other than my wife, Angela. She's always a great guest to have. We have Nick Searcy. Nick, how are you doing?
Pretty good, Josh. Thanks for having me.
Good. I appreciate you taking time to do this. I know you're extremely busy, and we both share a passion around the subject that we're going to talk about today, and you've been involved in this fight for a long time, trying to make sure that justice is served around what happened in our country on January the 6th of 2021. And so I wanted to sit down with you and just get some of the knowledge that you have about this, but also discuss some solutions, some things that I know you are working on behind the scenes. And a lot of it is a fight that just takes place in the public sphere. It's making sure that we don't stop talking about how important this issue is and how egregious what happened on that day and what has happened since then to some of these people. And so we'll discuss that. I would like for you to let the audience know a little bit about who you are, what you've done, where you come from, how did you end up in Kentucky, and just talk a little bit about that, if you would.
Well, I've been an actor for a long time. My wife and I got married 38 years ago, and we spent 30 or so years in Burbank, California, back and forth. But I'm originally from North Carolina, and my wife is from Owensboro, Kentucky. So we would always come back, and we always felt like, we're not really the California types. We always never really felt at home there. It was like, this is where I have to be to do my work. But so when it came time, it was for a few years here. And in the last few years, I've been telling Leslie, we got to get out of here. We got to get out of California. It's going down. And then at first she was like, I don't want to leave, But when COVID hit and everything sort of really went crazy in California, and the people really turned, it was bad in California. To be there during COVID, it was bad. So that's what convinced Leslie.
We had a tyrannical governor here in Kentucky as well. We actually had some friends of ours that we met that moved here as a result of the same thing from California. And so they were trying to pick a state where they were going to come. And they said, well, Kentucky's got supermajority Republican in the House and in the Senate, so we'll go to Kentucky. And then found out we had a governor that was trying to lock the state down. And we had to rein all that in. So, but it did bring a lot of things to light during COVID. And during that year as well, in 2020, there was a lot of unrest across the country as well. We did see that.
Yeah.
And so, Trump ended up, they ended up saying Trump didn't win the election, right?
Right.
And after that happened, brings us to January the 6th. And we could talk about your career all day. You've got a lot that you've done. And, I'm not minimizing that at all. But I know you ended up at the Capitol on January the 6th. So maybe talk a little bit about that. How'd you end up there?
Yeah.
And what was going on that day?
Well, I didn't originally want to go to January 6th, but my friend Chris Burgard, who I'd done a documentary with, he kept saying, this is important, we should go. I was planning a trip back to North Carolina anyway, so I decided, okay, I'll just change my ticket and I'll stop by Washington on January 5th and see what happens, So it didn't turn out so great. But so, we were there on January 6th, and I walked around like everybody else. I went to the speech at the Ellipse, and I saw the biggest crowd I've ever seen. And mostly it was people of all races, all ages, singing hymns, saying the Pledge of Allegiance, waving flags. To me, it looked like a happy crowd. I mean, everybody that I talked to was willing to talk, and this is really important. And, we've got a country to save and that sort of thing. But it was not, I didn't see any anger or violence there.
Yeah.
So anyway, I walked to the Capitol with everybody else after the speech was over. And for some reason, I wound up on the side of the Capitol towards the Supreme Court, between the Capitol and the Supreme Court. And over there, it was fairly peaceful. I mean, it was sort of rowdy. I mean, people were singing.
Right.
And some people got up on the Capitol steps, but I didn't see any of the violence that was taking place because all that took place on the other side of the building.
Yeah.
And we would hear things. We would hear like something that sounded like a pop, somebody says that's a flashbang or that's a smoke bomb, but it was all on the other side. Mm-hmm. So at a certain point, it seemed like the day was over. And so I went back to the place we were staying. At one point during the day, I had called into the Rush Limbaugh show and I gave like a live report, this is what I'm seeing and all this. So it didn't seem like anything really of great importance had occurred that day as far as what I could see.
Right.
And then when I got home that night and we turned on the television and you turn on the news and it looks like all hell is broken loose, And I'm getting calls and texts from home going, "Are you okay?" I'm going, "I'm fine. I don't know what everybody's talking about." And so just immediately, the things that the government was saying about that day, about how we had all come there to try to overthrow the government, it was like, that's not what I saw.
Right.
And so the more that it came out, the more the government tried to sell this idea that this was like some sort of plot to overthrow democracy. Yeah. The more Chris and I kept saying, we should say something about this, or like, let's find out about this, because it didn't jibe with anything that we had experienced. So that's what kind of put us on the path we made 2 films about January 6th. The first one was called Capital Punishment, and it was released in November of 21. And in that movie, we were really just trying to piece together what really happened,
right,
as opposed to what the government said and what the government was doing, because they had already begun like throwing these people in prison, calling them domestic terrorists, not letting them even go to trial. It's too dangerous to let these dangerous people out on bond. Most of them had never been arrested for anything before. A lot of them were police officers and veterans and, church deacons. And I mean, just people you would trust your children with.
I've met some of them.
Yeah. I mean, these are the most decent people. And they, by mischaracterizing them. Anyway, that's what set us on the path. And that's where I've really gotten to know a lot of these people, talking to them and talking to their families and seeing what's happening. And so it's really become a real passion. It's kind of taken over my life in the last 4 years.
Yes, sir.
Is to try to get the truth out about what really happened that day.
How many people were there that day? I know they don't have an exact figure, but...
And that's the thing. They don't want you to know the exact. Right. How can they not know?
Because I've seen some part of your documentary and different things, and the span of people, and all I had seen was what was the news had projected, and I thought it looks like 1 million people.
I think it's between 1 and 2 million, and that's from estimates from people that we've talked to.
Right.
But it's like they try to make it like it was a few thousand crazy people who were trying to kill everybody in the Capitol building. And There were 2 million people there.
The government also uses the media, and they use the media on that day to push the narrative that they wanted, because just what she was saying, the people, when you look at your documentary and other things that we have looked at, and
with what we got to see firsthand, like the news
stuff that was coming across,
because it is scary what they showed on the news that looked very serious, and so if everybody was in that mindset, it would be. But you're saying you were there, and you were never fearful for your life. You never knew anything was. You were around a bunch of calm people.
Yeah. And I think, the way they did that is they show you the stuff of the, famously the people battling with police at the barricades and all that. By not releasing all the 40,000 hours of footage on that day, they have sold you this narrative that these people just sort of walked up and started attacking the police.
That's exactly right.
And that's not what happened. I mean, we've gone through all this footage. And if they ever do release it all, which I hope they eventually will, what you will find out is that the police were the aggressors that day.
Yes.
On the other side of the building, the crowd was standing around. They were singing. They were outside the Capitol. They were saying the Pledge of Allegiance. They were waving flags. And at a certain point, a flare went up, and the Capitol Police started firing into the middle of the crowd. Peaceful crowd. They fired flashbangs in. A man named Benjamin Phillips got hit with a flashbang. He had a heart attack immediately and died. Another man had a heart attack on that front lawn. And the police were the aggressors. So in a lot of these instances where you see people struggling with the police, there are two things going on. Either they are reacting to the aggressive tactics and the literal assault that the police were doing. And in other cases, the people that were attacking the police were not your run-of-the-mill average Trump supporters. These were, we have footage of people changing clothes in the bushes. There were people there that were deliberately trying to cause something bad to happen that day. And that's what they leave out. All the time I get in these fights on Twitter with people showing me, oh, this footage, I guess you're proud of these patriots for attacking the police. I go, show the 10 minutes leading up to that.
Right.
Don't just show me that. Show me what happened before that.
Well, a lady that got charged for protecting herself, correct?
Yeah. In our second documentary, The War on Truth, it's much more about the victims of the Department of Justice and how these people are having their lives destroyed by the FBI and the DOJ. And this lady, Victoria White, she's in our documentary. She got trapped in the tunnel where Roseanne Boylan also died, the second woman who died that day, who you only hear about Ashley Babbitt. Roseanne Boylan was smothered to death and then beaten while she was unconscious by a Capitol police officer named Lila Morris, who was then sent to the Super Bowl as some sort of hero. But Victoria White was trapped in that tunnel, and there was a police officer. His name is Jason Bagsham. She's suing him now. But you can see footage of him beating her in the head with a baton over 40 times. He beat her bloody. She is trapped in the tunnel. I kept asking her in the documentary, I said, why do you think he targeted you? She said, I have no idea. I don't know why. But she's putting her hand up to try to keep the blows from raining down on her head. And they charged her with assault or civil disorder because she touched the policeman's baton. And it's like you assaulted the police baton with your head. And she said, but that's the kind of thing. And then after this, they drag her through the tunnel, they arraign her, and in the course of all this, she loses her coat, she loses her shoes. It's freezing out that day. Yeah. And then they just, at a certain point, they just let her go. And she had to find her way home. And then 2 months later, they come to her house and they do a SWAT team raid on her house and treat her like she's a drug dealer or a killer. And she's gone through 4 years of this insanity of being charged for this when she was really nothing more than someone who got swept into the tunnel and then was beaten by the police.
Well, there's a couple of things that I think it's important to point out. One is when you look at a comparison of what happened in 2020 versus what they are saying happened and trying to frame what happened on January the 6th. There were at least 19 confirmed deaths through that summer of love, right? There was over 2,000 law officers that were assaulted and an innumerable amount of civilians that were assaulted. And I say that not to ever say that it's okay for any of that to happen, right?
Right.
But when you look at the imbalance in the justice system, what do you think is the driver behind that? What is the motive of the DOJ, the FBI, to specifically target that day those people? And they totally turned a blind eye to everything that happened. Most of those people that were arrested during 2020, within 8 hours were released back on the street.
And they actually were very violent.
Absolutely.
They burned, they started fires, tried to within the buildings. There's evidence, it's seen, and there was a lot of violence, and they meant to cause harm.
Yeah.
And Kamala Harris supported them.
Yeah.
They're not going to stop. They shouldn't stop helping promote the fund to bail the ones out of jail that actually went to jail.
Well, that's what you have to come to terms with, and it's hard to believe, but that is what this government wants to support, that kind of protest, because what this government, the people in power for the last 4 years, and maybe longer than that, have been trying to do is destroy the country, destroy the fabric of the society. So those people were protesting. The people that were protesting in those Summer of Love were protesting racist America.
Yeah,
that's really what the gist of that whole protest was. So those people were justified in doing, as far as the government's concerned, they said those people were justified because why? Because America's a racist country and we deserve whatever we get because of blah, blah, blah. That is, and the people funding those DAs in those big cities that would not prosecute those people, the people funding them are people like George Soros, people that want to destroy America.
Right.
And so that's why those protesters are good. And the people who went to Washington on January 6th, think about it. These are people who believe in God, by and large, people who believe in the Constitution, people who think America is the greatest country in the world, and people who thought that our Constitution was being violated by what had been done in the 2020 election. So those people who went there were trying to preserve the country, trying to preserve the rule of law. And so that's why they had to be destroyed.
Right.
Because this government does not want those people to succeed.
Right.
They want the people that are trying to tear down the country to succeed.
We've just seen a perfect example of that just in the last couple of weeks with Daniel Penny, who everybody is protesting and rioting because he gets released, and then they're celebrating this guy that shot the CEO of United Healthcare, saying, well, you just don't know what it's like to be pushed and to be done wrong. And it's a total mixed up system. And I believe that you're dead on. They do want to rip apart the very fabric of this country. It was built on a constitution. It was built on Christian values and principles. And all of those things that we embrace are a threat to them remaining in power.
Yeah. I mean, the Daniel Penny case is perfect, a perfect illustration of this. What he did that day was hold down a man who was threatening people on the subway.
Right.
And 20 years ago, that guy would have been a hero. They've been making movies about that guy, but all of a sudden now you have a district attorney and a court system in Manhattan and New York City. You bring a case against the guy who tried to save people on the subway from a random criminal. And they want those random criminals to be let loose because they want a terrified population. They want the fabric of society to be fearful so that they can advance their argument that this country doesn't work. America doesn't work. It's a terrible place. That is really the underlying theme to everything that they do. And Daniel Penny, I mean, I was actually shocked.
I was too.
That he was acquitted.
I was too. I thought for sure that it was a complete setup. They couldn't come to agreement on the first charge so they could get him on the second.
Yeah, I mean, and I think it shocked a lot of people. I think a lot of us expected that the New York jury would go ahead and send that young man to prison, like they did Chauvin in Minneapolis, the George Floyd case. I mean, very similar situations.
Right.
Except that Chauvin, of course, was a police officer. But, I mean, it is really, and that's maybe the hardest thing for people who don't necessarily pay attention as much as we do to politics, trying to get them to sort of entertain the possibility that the situation is that dire, that these things can be so warped. Is hard for them to believe.
Yeah.
Well, I thought that one of the statements that our current vice president made, Kamala Harris, and she ran for president as well. She made the comparison that the January 6th, and you were there, was just like 9/11.
Yeah. Worse than Hiroshima and 9/11 and the Civil War all put together.
Worse than Pearl Harbor.
Worse than everything, yeah.
So you remember where you were on 9/11, right?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I remember where I was.
So how does that compare to what you were seeing on that day?
I mean, 9/11 was a terror attack on Americans and killed Americans, and it was deliberate. And for her to make the connection with the crowd that you show in your documentary and different things, and saying that you all, because you were there, you're a terrorist.
Well, that's the whole that is the most ridiculous thing, is that this whole idea, which they have run with, they still haven't stopped, is that everybody that went to Washington that day was some sort of white supremacist, racist, terrorist, terrible person, basically saying anybody who doesn't vote for the Democrats is a terrible, horrible racist. I mean, that's all they ran on. That's all they've got. Thankfully, they lost this time. I personally think they lost the last time too. And
we know for a fact that they rigged and cheated the system last time. I mean, we have the proof. And there's been this idea of, was it processed that they stole it with, or did they actually steal the votes? And we've heard all that, but we've just seen a couple cases that have come forth where people have been exonerated that they had charged with lying about saying the election was stolen. And so Sidney Powell, I don't know if you've seen any of that case, but the truth is starting to come out. And so one thing that I'm seeing, though, that concerns me is there's been some expediting of some of these people that have not yet been sentenced. Okay. I have a couple constituents right here in our area, more than a couple, that have been charged and or are in prison right now. There's one gentleman that's a constituent of mine. He has 6-year-old twins. He's in his mid-40s, and he got 4.5 years. And the primary reason why that they went with the max was because they couldn't compel him to say that he was sorry for being there on that day, pretty much, And so here his kids are getting ready to go through Christmas
without their dad.
Without their dad there, right? And they don't care. And so then another gentleman that is going to get sentenced on next Friday. So he's headed to D.C. on Thursday, going to be sentenced. Kind of a similar situation. He has, I think, like an 8-year-old, a 10-year-old, a 17-year-old. And one of the charges that they gave him is that specifically he had been dealing with gout in his foot, and had just had a flare-up and had actually been kind of prescribed a walking stick for when he was dealing with gout. And in the process of the day, his stick got broke. And so they charged him not just with entering, but entering with a deadly weapon. You know?
Well, they do this to these people, and I mean, it happens over and over again. And they are expediting a lot of these cases because they're trying to put as many of them away as possible before Trump gets in there, because Trump has been talking about pardoning them.
Yes, sir.
So they're just sort of, moving it along. I wish Trump would come out and say, I'm going to stop all these cases from proceeding, as soon as I get in there. So just cut it out. I wish he would make a statement like that. But there's so many people just like your constituent that's happened to. It's like they get in there and the judge will say, if you'll say you're sorry, if you'll pledge your allegiance to dear leader, like they do in Soviet countries, in communist countries, if you will rescind your support of Trump and say how wrong you were to support him and admit that the election was legitimate, then we'll give you a lighter sentence.
Right.
And that is so evil. That is a thought crime. I mean, that's literally what they do in totalitarian societies. Yes. But over and over again, this has happened. Mm-hmm. And the fact that he had a broken cane and that became a deadly weapon. There's one of the people in the War on Truth is a gentleman named Colton Maccabee, who got sentenced very similar, 4.5 years, something like that. I think he may have gotten 7 years, but they charged him with assault with a deadly weapon because he had on motorcycle gloves that you can order off Amazon that had metal on them. And he helped a police officer up off the ground. He was caught in the crush of the tunnel. He fell on top of this police officer. He helped him up, put his hands on him. You can hear on the audio the police officer saying, "Thank you."
Yeah.
And you can hear Colton Maccabee saying, "I'm a police officer too. I know what you're going through." Mm-hmm. Jury heard all this, convicted him. Assault with a deadly weapon because he touched that man with his gloves. There's a man named Jay Johnston who's very similar. He pled guilty because a lot of times what happens is these people, they plead guilty to stop the bleeding.
Yes.
Because they're being bankrupted, and they know that if they go to trial in D.C., they don't have a chance anyway.
Right.
So they plead guilty. The government walks around and goes, "Hey, we got another deadly domestic terrorist." And my friend Jay, his charge was that he touched a police shield that was being passed back. He was in the tunnel, passed back through the tunnel. Jay's pretty tall. He took the police shield like this and passed it to somebody else. And by touching that police shield, they called it civil disorder, assault, you're touching police equipment or whatever. And so he's awaiting sentencing, but supposedly has to report to jail around January 17th.
Right.
They're sending as many of these people to jail as they can.
And I don't think a lot of times people understand that what is actually going on with some of these cases, to where they are actually making up stuff to make it look as if that they are violent criminals.
Yeah.
And then that brings up the term, you've seen it floating around, and I've tried to squash it every chance I get. I've seen Congressman Massey came out yesterday or this morning, and he's like, "Hey, we've been vindicated. I told you that there was confidential human sources there." Yeah. And nobody would believe me. Well, the FBI report comes out, and I don't believe the FBI report. This is me personally. They had to admit that there were some there. They're saying 16 right now. We don't know how many paid provocateurs were there, but we know that they were there.
Yeah.
But I don't think people understand. Well, he got charged with assaulting a police officer. He should be in jail, you know. So this term's floating around out there. Trump should pardon all the non-violent offenders. Why is it important that people understand to not use that term, and why that the media is trying to push that?
Because, well, the government has classified things as violence that are not violence, like we just talked about. The guy had a cane that was broken. You touched a police shield. You pick up somebody and you had metal on your gloves. That's not. They are classified as violent, but that's not violence. And also, the other part of that is, like, even the ones that did maybe do some violent things, in a lot of cases, they were provoked.
Right.
That there were instigators there that pushed them forward, and then the policeman pushed them back, and then all of a sudden they're in the middle of this thing that they didn't want to be in.
Yeah.
So I don't think it's smart to try to make that distinction, because, and in fact, even if they were violent, every one of the January 6th people, no matter what they did, they've all had their constitutional rights violated.
That's right.
In some way or another. Either they were held without, their right to a speedy trial was revoked. Their right to a jury of their peers, because they all had to be tried in Washington, D.C. That's not their peers.
Yeah.
You try these people in Tennessee with the jury of the people that they grew up with, rather than a bunch of 97% Democrat people in Washington, D.C., you're going to get a very different outcome. So I think every single one of these people, no matter what they did, they should be pardoned, because they've all had their constitutional rights violated.
Yeah.
And that goes, a lot of people argue with me and say, well, what about the Antifa people that were there? To me, they were used too.
Yeah.
They were told a lie by the government. They were sent there under false pretenses. And yeah, they may have been bad people that were there with bad intentions, but they should be pardoned too, just like you let people off on technicalities all the time. Mm-hmm. And our court system does that routinely. If your rights have been violated and you weren't arrested or charged or tried in a legal way, then even if you're guilty of what they accuse you of, you should be freed.
Well, I know you hear a lot about Ashley Babbitt that got killed on that day, and I think in your first documentary, you interviewed her husband, and I talked with someone that was there on that day. This person, I think, ended up doing 45 days in a federal prison. Total different subject, but it was atrocious what he went through. The filth. He was sick the whole time. Yeah. There was mold everywhere, that he was placed inside of this cell. And so all of what they went through was crazy, but he was there near Ashley when she got killed. He actually tried to perform first aid to her. The police pushed him away. Yeah. And he said that what was going on, and your video proves it, the footage that you had in it, is that she was being more or less pushed. She's 110 pounds, 5'2", large men around her. They're progressing forward. There's a hole there in the glass. She gets up in it, no weapons on her, no way to defend herself. There's no way she could hear the gentleman that was there with the gun that shot her, telling her to stand down, and she gets killed. Well, they try to perform some type of first aid on her. This gentleman claims that he was in there over an hour and a half, that she had been dead for an extended period of time. Then when you look at the footage of them bringing her out of the Capitol, they've got her hooked up to oxygen. They're doing all types of stuff to her, which was, from what he told me, this is just what he said, it was an absolute farce. He said that she had been dead for a while. They knew it. They had to make it out like that they were the heroes in that situation.
It doesn't surprise me. I mean, there's a man in our second documentary, The War on Truth, named Taylor Hanson, who filmed the killing of Ashley Babbitt. He was there in the room with her when she was shot. And, his story is very similar. You see in this footage that he shot, she was trying to stop the people from breaking the windows. Right. She was there telling people to stop, telling the police they need reinforcement. She actually punches this guy who's trying to break the window out with a helmet. Ashley Babbitt was a hero.
Yeah.
And I believe that if you watch the footage, Michael Byrd, the man who shot her, his gun is out and it is pointed at that window like I'm going to shoot anybody who comes through there. Right. There were no verbal commands. No footage that I have ever seen could I hear any verbal commands from him.
Yeah.
So he shot without any warning and killed her. And it does not surprise me that they kind of let her die. I think they let her bleed out.
Yeah.
And that's what Taylor Hanson says, that the police that were there were pushing everybody back. That was trying to help her.
More or less the account that I was given by somebody that was there firsthand as well.
And this is just my personal theory after talking to Tarek Johnson and some other people that were there, that Tarek Johnson was a Capitol policeman who cleared the House and Senate chambers, against the orders of his superiors, because he knew that if anybody got in there, it could be worse.
Right.
And I think that what they wanted that day, they wanted it to be much worse. Yeah. They wanted more than just a couple of people to be dead. They wanted something so horrible that they could then demonize Trump supporters and Trump himself for the rest of eternity.
They weren't counting on actually dealing with good people.
Right.
And because they demonize us.
Yeah.
And they were counting on that to come out. And there were mostly very good-hearted, caring people, care about their country. Everybody, you always see the picture of the QAnon shaman, Jacob Chansley. And I've got to talk to him a couple times, and he's way out there, in some of his beliefs, and he was there doing some kind of shaman prayer, and he was whatever. But he had a great day. He's walking around getting pictures with these people. And it wasn't until Tucker, I think, got the footage and put that footage out that showed the police escorting him around, he would have rotted in prison before it was all said and done.
Yeah.
And so even the people that they try to frame as the face of what happened on January the 6th were not people there that were trying to kill people and trying to hurt people and trying to do evil things of that sort.
And if the media would put out there these young 6-year-old twins that their dad is gone at Christmas time, or the other guy, or some of the people that that they're average, good Christian people, then America would maybe think differently, but all they see is what the media has put out there, and they make them into bad people, but they're not.
Yeah. Well, they demonize these people, and you've seen all the pictures of Jordan Neely's family making speeches. The man that Daniel Penny, and look, humanize him. Look at this look how upset his family is. Well, they don't want to show you the families of the people that they've demonized. They don't want you to really know who these people are. Right. They want you to think of them the way they want to present them, and the whole thing has just been a narrative that they've concocted to try to demonize everybody. And the one point that I make that everybody seems to have missed about the day, January 6th, what was happening in the House and Senate that day was that people like Ted Cruz, people like Andy Biggs in Arizona, they were standing up and they were challenging the vote to try to send it back to the states for 10 days to do a recount, because we didn't believe that Joe Biden had legitimately won the election.
And we have the right to not believe that.
We have the absolute right, and there's a legal mechanism to address this. And that's what was happening in the House and Senate. The people who surrounded the Capitol wanted that to happen.
Yes.
They didn't want that procedure to be stopped. Who would have wanted that procedure to be stopped? Nancy Pelosi and the Democrats and the Biden administration. Right. So that's why why were the police waving people in? Why were they marching the shaman around inside the Senate check? Why were they doing all that? Because they wanted to disrupt that situation. Right. They wanted to stop that procedure. So what happened? They cleared the House and Senate. They declared, what a disaster. This is the worst thing since the Civil War. And then they came back and they go, it's too dangerous to keep doing that. Right. We're just going to go ahead and certify the election. So who did it help? It certainly didn't. The people who came to protest that day to overthrow democracy that day, it certainly didn't give them what they wanted.
Yeah.
It gave the other side, the people that are lying about it, what they wanted.
Right. And you talked about Jordan Neely. I've experienced the same thing with some of these people, because I've told a couple of them, I'm like, let's go get on the steps at Capitol. I'll organize something. We'll tell your story. And they're just like, we just want to move on with our lives. They don't want to be thrust out into the public. They're not. And Daniel Penny sat down in that interview and he's like, I didn't want any recognition. I just went for doing the right thing, And so I keep seeing these comparisons that is at the root and the heart of where we are as a country. And I tell people all the time that, I'm glad that President Trump got elected, and there was a lot of good things that happened on November the 5th of this year. But if you think that we can sit back and rest on our laurels and that this same, whatever it is, the deep state, all of that is out there is not going to continue.
Oh, yeah.
You've lost your mind.
They're not going to give up.
We have to fight. That's one reason we're sitting here today is I want to make sure that we are out in the public every chance we get with letting people know, and the people that are in President Trump's ear, that we expect and we think the right thing to do is blanket pardon, commute, get these people out of prison. It was a terrible day what happened to Americans. Not to AOC.
No.
Not to the people that were whining, saying, oh, we were scared and hiding in our office, and come to find out they were lying. Not the who knows about the pipe bomb, that was placed. Who placed that there?
Yeah.
All of those things are what they focus on, and they don't focus on the 6-year-old kids over here without a daddy. They don't focus on this 70-year-old man that I know that laid in a cell that was infested with rats, that had mold everywhere, asbestos falling down, and sick for 45 straight days, lungs still having issues with them as a result of it. That is not the focus. And so I think we have to remain vigilant. We got to keep getting the word out there. And make sure that President Trump, and he said this just this past Sunday in that interview, he made the statement. I think he used the words "all of them."
Yeah,
and I think that has to be the goal, and it's the right thing to do.
Yeah.
Do you agree with that? Am I looking at that wrong?
And I mean, what I was going to say is, I think the pardon is the first step, because a lot of these people, what you were talking about, how they don't want to be out in public, telling their stories and all this. You have to realize how much these people have lost.
Yes.
It's not just the ones that were put in jail, and it's not just the jail is not the.
That's right.
They have had their whole lives destroyed, their businesses bankrupted. When all this erupted, and the government was putting out signs that saying, if you know anybody that was in Washington on January 6th, please turn them into the FBI. And these raids that the FBI is still conducting, they did one last week. They come to these people's houses at 6 a.m. in the morning with a SWAT team and all this, and they're living in a neighborhood, and all their neighbors are going, what happened to
That's exactly what
Jim over there? What did he do? So they think he must be some sort of horrible thing, some horrible terrorist or something. And so they can't get a job. They're demonized in their communities. Their reputations are destroyed. Their children at school, they go to school and go, his daddy's in prison. He tried to overthrow the government and all that. It's all that pain that they've caused.
Yes.
And that has to be addressed as well. I think that's down the road, but I think the first step is you got to pardon them all. You got to get them out of jail. You got to drop these charges. You got to stop these SWAT raids that the government is conducting on these innocent people. And then we have to talk about restitution.
Yeah.
How do you make these people whole? Because so many of them have lost everything.
Yeah.
Everything. Time away from their families, everything. And it's like a price has to be paid for that.
Well, you were talking a little bit ago before we got started about this 5-step process. So the first step was we got to elect President Trump, right? That happened. The second step, it revolved around appointments.
Yeah, got to get people in there that will counteract the deep state that has caused all this. Yeah.
And then it's the pardon.
Yeah.
And then that's where it's really going to get intense.
Yeah. Well, the pardons, I think he can pardon anybody he wants. I'm saying
after that,
I think after that is when you have to go after the people who did this.
Yeah.
Because you have to, it's not about retribution. It's about justice.
That's right.
The January 6th committee, Liz Cheney, Adam Kinzinger, all those people, they deleted evidence.
Yes.
They destroyed evidence. They lied. They suborned perjury. They brought witnesses. They called, inappropriately contacted the attorneys of witnesses that appeared before them. That whole thing was a lie. And the damage that they caused is immeasurable. It's sedition. It's treason. There's a lot of things that you can say about what that is. But they need to pay for what they did. And that's not about retribution. That's about justice.
Exactly. And that's what they want to frame it as, retribution.
Yeah.
And And that's why I hate using the analogy of going back to 2020. Well, look what they let them get away with, and then so you should let them get away with that.
Yeah.
I don't even see it as remotely the same other than the fact that it proves the imbalance in the justice system that we're dealing with. I know there's been some leaked information out there that said that Joe Biden was considering doing a blanket pardon for some of these people.
Yeah.
I think that's great that that's coming out, because it shows that they understand that there is a justice day coming.
Yeah. It's like, why would you be asking for a pardon if you didn't do anything wrong? And they're all, Jonathan Turley has this thing about like pardon envy or something that where they're all like going, well, I need a pardon too. I might need a pardon. Why do you need a pardon? It's because you did something wrong.
Yeah.
And all the Matthew Graves, the district attorney for DC, Merrick Garland, all these people. Christopher Wray just resigned.
Yeah.
He lied to Congress for 4 years.
Yes.
And there needs to be justice for those people.
Yeah.
Now, the other part of that is that it's going to be difficult to get justice if they are all charged in Washington, D.C., where the D.C. court system is hopelessly partisan and the jury pool is hopelessly partisan. So what I think needs to happen is they need to bring cases against these people in the states where their victims lived.
Right.
For a man like Colton Maccabee who lives in Tennessee, these people should be they should be tried in Tennessee, not in D.C.
And I don't know exactly how the venue laws work, but that is an interesting perspective, because if they would take these cases back to where these people live and the people of their area understood how badly they were mistreated and misjudged, then maybe we could see some justice for some of this. So I don't know if I haven't had a chance to read the FBI report that was released on yesterday, if you have or not, but one of the big topics that's come out of it was the 16 confidential human sources that they're saying that actually broke the law on that day. Mm-hmm. So I think they're saying 4 that went into the Capitol, and then the rest have went into restricted areas. Yeah. As far as the provoking that was taking place, I don't know. I've done some looking at some of the Ray Epps stuff. There were specific people that the media really made out to be something, such as him, or tried to make it as if they were nothing, whatever the case may be. What is your thoughts about the provoking that was going on? We know the 16 people that were there, but you've interviewed a lot of people. What were they seeing? And you had some footage of people changing clothes out of Trump clothes and, whatever.
Well, Ray Epps is the easiest one to go down this road with, because he's, night before he's out there saying, we got to go into the Capitol. Before anything even happened, he's already saying, we got to go into the Capitol. Those people are the source of our problem. So he's instigating the crowd for over 24 hours. Yeah. The first breach, or what another thing is, this entering a restricted area thing. As the people were coming from the ellipse to the Capitol building, there was a crew of people that went around taking down all the fencing around the Capitol building that said restricted area.
Yeah.
They took all that down so that people didn't know. There was no sign that says this is a restricted area. A lot of the people that have been charged say, I didn't know I was entering a restricted area. Nothing said that.
Y'all have video footage of them taking it down.
That's exactly right. We see them removing it. Why are they doing that? Because they want people to be there. The other thing about Epps, he's involved in the first breach at the first barricade, which happened 20 minutes before Trump stopped speaking. It was while the speech was going on. And so, all these people, after the barricades have been removed, they're surrounding the Capitol. And in our film, we have this footage of Ray Epps. We see him in the big crowd at the foot of the Capitol building. A flare goes up, and within less than a minute, 8 guys dressed in military gear come down through the crowd. They get Ray Epps, and they march him out 4 in front of him, 4 behind him, march him out of there like a military operation. And right after that is when the Capitol Police start firing munitions into the middle of the crowd.
Yeah.
So I'm sorry. There were more than 16 there. Maybe they put out that to just sort of go, yeah, well, we have to admit there were some.
Right.
There were much more than that, and we have not gotten to the bottom of it yet. You know, they can say these people didn't work for the FBI, but there's the DHS involved. There's other agencies, CIA, that might have had people there. There were a lot of people there that were not, 68-year-old Emily from Arkansas who wanted to go to the Capitol building because she supported Trump.
Right.
There were a lot of people there that were not part of the crowd.
Yeah. And I think I saw a post this morning or yesterday, and they put it this way, that the J6ers were charged with rioting, and the confidential sources that were there actually got reimbursed.
Yeah.
For being there, breaking the law.
Yeah, their expenses were paid, and it's ridiculous.
It is.
And that's the thing. That's my experience with trying to get people to face these things, and by showing them these movies, is that people can't believe that their government would be that surreptitious, that sinister. Mm-hmm. But that's what's going on. That's what's happening.
That's exactly where we are.
Yeah.
Which is important while we keep fighting back. I guess, what would you encourage people in the public to do? What can they do to help in this situation? And I think one important thing is to educate yourself, because you don't know, right in your community, you could have somebody that was mistreated in this way. And that's kind of what happened to me. After this happened, I went into office in 2021. I didn't hear a whole lot about it. There wasn't, nobody was really reaching out to me about it. And then just in the past year, some of these people actually finally got a court date and started going before judges, and started to have some people reach out to me about it. So I think it's important to educate yourself about what really happened, not based on what the government said, not based on what the media narrative is. But is there anything else that people can do that maybe helps this situation at all?
I think the more people start waking up and saying, okay, the news may be lying to me. Mm-hmm. I may not be able to believe this story that they're telling me. I think that's the first step. And being open to the fact that, all these people that the major networks have demonized and have called right-wing conspiracies and all this stuff, it's like, okay, how many lies have to be proven?
Right.
Until you start to doubt the narrative. It's like, I think Elon Musk said something yesterday about how, what's the difference between truth and a right-wing conspiracy theory? About 6 months. That's the difference. Because
exactly.
It comes true. And so that's the first step, is just start open yourself to the possibility that the government and the news might be lying to you.
Well, don't you think that CNN and MSDNC and all of those news medias are probably already preparing their video clips, of these people when they get pardoned, and when they get pardoned, they're going to be running these videos of them busting the glass out.
Oh yeah,
they're going to demonize them.
Absolutely,
when it happens, and I think that's what scares people. I think that's why people sometimes are afraid to engage, because they don't want to be viewed as that.
Yeah. But
they don't understand that that's what the left and a lot of our government already views them as. That's why people protesting at abortion clinics are sitting in jail right now.
Right. Well, that's the thing. We got to stop being afraid of that. We got to stop being afraid of what the media is going to say, because we know what they're going to say.
Yeah.
They're going to say he pardoned all these violent insurrectionists who tried to overthrow the government.
Without weapons.
Without weapons. Yeah, it's like the most armed segment of the population just forgot their guns that day when they went to overthrow democracy. But, you take these... Part of the reason that we have not heard from the real victims of January 6th for so long is that these people get terrified by their SWAT team raids, and then they get charged with all these things, and then they have these attorneys that tell them don't say anything.
Yeah.
Don't say a word because it may affect your case.
Right.
Well, a lot of these attorneys, I hate to say it, but another weird fact about being charged in the District of Columbia is that your attorney has to be licensed in the District of Columbia. In other words, you can't bring your favorite attorney from Lexington or whatever to defend you. You have to get an attorney there. So a lot of those pro bono attorneys that are doing these cases in Washington hate their defendants.
Yeah.
You know, they think they're all maniacs and they should go to jail. So part of the thing that's been going on, the system has been so set up that they've told these people, don't say a word, don't tell your story. Whereas if they had been open, more open, and really, been able to get their story out, the outrage might have grown.
Right.
We might have known more. Now, that's, hindsight's 20/20. But that's part of the sinister nature of what's been going on. These people have been told to be silent. Silence. Don't talk about what we've done to you, or it could go worse for you. It's very, very evil.
Yeah. Well, you come from California, and I know you travel a lot back and forth. Are you seeing people start to wake up more?
Yeah, I would say so. I mean, I haven't spent a lot of time in California lately, thankfully.
Aren't you glad?
But yeah, I think people are now more open to it because honestly, I think the election shocked a lot of these people.
Yeah.
The fact that Trump won, and not only won, but won the popular vote, I think people are starting to go, okay, wait a minute. Maybe I have been lied to about this or that or the other thing. And so I think some of them are never going to wake up. Some of them are hardcore partisans, or they're either brainwashed or they know that they're lying, one or the other. So you're never going to reach them. But I think more and more the people that maybe don't spend their lives paying attention to politics as much are starting to wake up to the fact that, a wrong has been done here, and the government does lie.
Yeah.
From time to time. The government does lie.
Do. I work in the government, and I will tell you that they do.
Yeah.
It happens. And I think the truth is the greatest, most precious commodity that we have is the truth. And that's what this podcast is about. I know that's what you've been trying to do in all the venues that you have influence, is just speak the truth, speak the truth, speak the truth.
Yeah.
And it's resonating with people.
Yeah, and that's why we called our movie The War on Truth.
Yes.
The government wants to control what their version of the truth is.
Yeah.
They want you forced to accept it. If you don't accept our version of the truth, you might go to jail like all these other people did. So the truth is the key. And the more, hopefully, these people now feel free to tell their stories, to tell what they actually did that day, when they're exonerated, when they don't have to pay the price, for opening their mouths. Right. After Trump gets them out, then I think the truth will come out, because from all of these over 1,500 people that have been charged, arrested, these stories need to be told.
Absolutely.
And films need to be made about these people.
Yes.
It's like these people, it's just like, films used to be about the little guy against the big machine. That's what this is.
Exactly what it is.
Exactly what this is.
Yes. Well, I appreciate you taking the time to be with us. Why don't you tell people where they can find your documentaries, and then you've got a book.
Got a book
that
out.
just came out not too long ago. So.
Yep. Well, the documentary, both documentaries are at salemnow.com. That's one place you can get them. Capital Punishment is available for free on Rumble right now. If you just do a search for Capital Punishment and my name, it'll come up. And The War on Truth is also available at its own website. A group called hisglory.tv has it, and it's also available at warontruthmovie.com. Okay. And my first book, Justify This, is the name of it, and it's available on Amazon and at Barnes & Noble. And if you come to my Twitter page, yes, Nick Searcy, you can get an autograph copy for that.
Right in time for Christmas.
That's right. Right.
And the book is more or less just an autobiography about you, about what it's like to be a conservative in California and Hollywood to some degree, ain't it?
Yeah, it is. I mean, there's some politics in it. It's mostly more a book about, like, you know, how I became an actor.
Yes,
I grew up in a little town in North Carolina, and I didn't know anybody who'd ever been an actor, you know, and it's just sort of that journey is kind of fun. And, you know, family stuff, how I have an adopted son. There's chapters about dealing with the foster care system, and then, of course, chapters about a lot of stuff. There's a chapter about the movie I directed, Gosnell, which is about the abortion doctor in Philadelphia who was convicted of murder, and then the documentaries about January 6th and how I figured out too late that, you know, I was a conservative in Hollywood and I should keep my mouth shut. I didn't figure that out until I'd already run it. So
the gate has been opened.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
No, we appreciate it. Thank you for taking time. I know you're busy, but this is a subject that's important.
It is.
I know it's a passion of yours, and we appreciate all the work that you're doing, trying to keep the word out there and working through all the venues and connections that you have to keep the truth going out.
I'm not a legal expert. I'm not, you know, I that's not my area of expertise. But what I hope to do with these movies is just humanize these people that the government has been lying about, and that's one thing that I think I can do, and just, you know, assure everybody out there it's not. These people are the most decent, loving, kind. These are great people that this government has tried to destroy. Mm-hmm. And
some of them they pretty much have destroyed.
Yeah, and they need to be made whole.
Yes.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you for joining us. Make sure that you like, subscribe, share this video, get it out, get the truth out for us. Until next time, God bless.